March 11th, 45C channel communications between Balance and Vinegrove aircraft were very good. Range was 180 to 200 miles, with the Colgate relay extending it to 400 to 450 miles. March 25th, 45C channel Vinegrove 21 and 24 reported they were on time, and 3 minutes later respectively, at CP1. At 0812 hours, the bootleg scouting force reported that bombers would be about 4 to 7 minutes late at CP2. At 0820 hours, bootleg rum scouting force reported that bombers would be about 14 minutes late at Camp 2. At 0835 hours, Borax 20 reported that bombers would be about 35 minutes late at Camp 2. Each of the above changes in timings was passed to the 4th and 479th Group on their A channels. Vinegrove 21 and 22 reported that they crossed CP2 36 minutes late, while Vinegrove 23 and 24 crossed CP2 40 minutes late. All bombers made contact with fighters when they reached CP2. Saffron Walden was a mecca in 1943 to 44. Everybody who was anybody came into the crowded ops room in the old grammar school at one time or another. There weren't very fancy facilities for visitors, but the place was so much like a three-ring circus during a mission that no spectator worried about not having a place to sit down and stretch out. Saffron had been the indoctrination center for virtually all the other control staffs used by the 8th and 9th Air Forces in the European campaign. Both the 66th and 67th Fighter Wings sent their control staffs to the 65th for a number of missions before they opened up the 66th at Sawston on November 19, 1943, and the 67th at Walcott Hall on December 11, 1943. For a short while in January and February 1944, the 70th Fighter Wing of the 9th actually operated in liaison with the 65th, controlling from a portable setup in the woods near Boxstead. Some of the earlier 9th Air Force fighter groups, operationally controlled by the 65th and the 70th Fighter Wings, flew on 8 Air Force escort missions while they were training for D-Day and the commencement of tactical air operations. There were many problems hardly hinted at this brief narrative. For a while in the fall and winter of 1943 to 44, for example, the interference of German radar along the continental coastline threatened to make VHF unusable. The pilots heard a terrible high and piercing whine in their earphones, and there was not anything they could do about it except turn up the volume and try to hear control over and above it. The situation got very bad, and then one day a signal officer from the 8th Air Force turned up at one of the fighter groups with a new radio. "Try this on your next trip," he told the group leader, "and see what you get." What he got was clear voice of the controller without the whine. The signal people had come through again, with an ingenious radio shutter device synchronized to the frequency of the radar overtones that were causing the trouble. In non-technical language, the device acted as though it turned the pilot radio on and off the same number of times per second that the pulses were received from the bothersome radar. The pilot set was on only when the radar was silent, some 200 to 500 times per second. Needless to say, it wasn't too long before every aircraft was fitted with the new dampener. And so it went on, as it always does in war. Weapon, counter-weapon, problem, solution, attack, counterattack. The same sergeant Mayer mentioned earlier got the Legion of Merit for another outstanding technical improvement in control. At first, the controllers had to holler, transmit, into the phone each time they wanted to send the message out through a forward relay station. This was so that the operator at the relay station out on the coastline could switch over his radio from receiving through transmitting to let the controller's voice out onto the air. As soon as the message was completed, the controller said, "Over," and the operator would then switch the other way, so as to pick up the reply from the aircraft. Sergeant Mayer figured out a way to do this whole thing electrically by causing a 1,000 cycle tone to be sent over the telephone wires when the controller pressed his key to talk. This tone would automatically do the switching at the forward relay. It made controlling much more efficient and saved operators for other work. Later on, many other improvements were worked out with the British GPO, resulting in the final arrangement described later in this booklet. All of control is a signalman's paradise or nightmare, depending on which way you look at it. But there was hardly a week in the whole 2 years of control at Saffron Walden that didn't see some major communications change or problem to solve. The ops room was totally rewired at least twice, and the job of keeping it up to date with the needs of operations kept 4 British telephone men busy full-time the whole while. The first thing you would have to acquire when you start out to do controlling is a good signal officer. For the reader who is interested in specifically what changes were made and when, there follows a chronological table, Chapter 3, F, which shows all those things from beginning to end. Now, to wind up this short and simple tale of fighter control in the 8th, we have to go back to that fork in the road and talk a while about PPI scope control. After that, with a few words about D-Day and invasion operations, we will turn to a functional discussion of control, the recording of which is the prime purpose of this replication.